All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully your favorite Chelsea podcast out there and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here alongside Nick, and we are live at Classic Football Show London.
Come on. What a noise.
A lot of wonderful people here, not completely drunk yet, so, there could be more raucous. But Nick, a few days in London here, but we're joined by our good friend Matt Law as well.
Yeah, Matt decided that he liked us enough to come out and do a live show with all of you. And we're going to have some fun with this one because, well, Dan's spilling beer on himself.
That's true. We were not drunk enough yet, so I was trying to get us ahead of the game.
The beer goes in the mouth, Dan.
That's true.
We're going to talk a little bit about Tottenham and what's coming up on Thursday and the nerves that I personally have around that. We're going to talk a little bit about the news and notes from the long international break that we just went through. And then we're going to close with a little story time and Q&A for Matt. So lots of good stuff here, Dan.
And Matt, just maybe to get us started here, the importance of the match from a Chelsea and a Spurs perspective. I mean, I think there are two clubs with very specific challenges at the moment.
I mean, Spurs, it doesn't really matter in the wider scheme of things too much for Spurs. It's just a pride thing for Spurs. For Chelsea, it's the biggest game of the season, easily. I think it decides it. I said this to you on a pod recently, didn't I? I've thought for a while this game will shape and define what happens now. If they win, and I've thought all along this season they will finish top 5 and qualify for the Champions League. I've said it all season, I still think it. If they win, I think they sail through and do it. Anything other than win, I'll start to doubt myself. I really think it's huge for Chelsea, absolutely massive.
Nick, do you have a different opinion?
No.
You're allowed to.
No, I think this is one of those games, like you have a derby game. It's a huge kind of back and forth between two clubs that don't like each other. And it's at a critical juncture where Chelsea have kind of stumbled through the first part of 2025 a little bit and need to kind of get on a little bit of a run now, win a couple in a row, start to feel a little bit better about their place. I think this would be a huge game to have a big performance and to come out and have a comfortable win.
I mean, was it... So the away win against Tottenham, that was the week before they beat Villa at home, am I right? I mean, that kind of 2 weeks was the last time I think Chelsea really played properly well. They were flying then, and I don't really remember a top performance from Chelsea since then.
We don't either, so that's...
But, you can take some sort of optimism from the fact one of their better performances came against Tottenham. I think it's huge for both managers as well. I think Enzo, there's been quite a negative feel even through the little run of victories around Enzo and around the style of play. And I think as well with 9-10 games left, they need something just to give them a shot of momentum, a shot of optimism. The atmosphere will be good on Thursday, that's guaranteed, at least to start with. And if they win, the atmosphere will stay good. And it might just sort of be enough to keep it going to the end of the season. I mean, I just think it's massive for them, I really do. And, Tottenham, I think Tottenham actually, when they're all fit, have got a good team, but they've been so bad in the league this season. They're 14th. Chelsea, we know, probably have to win, if not all their home games, 95% of their home games going in. And if you can't beat 14th in the league at home, you've got a problem for finishing in that top 5.
Yeah, it is a different type of Spurs team that we've seen previously. They are a little more gettable. They have not had great success. And I almost want to get a conversation going around this idea that if you take maybe the parts of those teams, maybe starting with the manager, you have Maresca and you have Ange. Who are you giving the nod to maybe as just like an individual? We know that Maresca has been someone who's been a little bit under fire recently, but he had that great stretch earlier in the season.
So what I think you've got is quite interesting, actually. You've got Maresca, who's... I know the second half of the season, the results haven't been great, but as an overall package, they are 4th, 5th. The results haven't been too bad. The results are good, but a lot of the fans don't like the style of football. And you've got Tottenham, where they love the idea of the style of the football. It's exactly, they were singing, you were singing, we've got our Chelsea back too. They were singing, we've got our Tottenham back. And they love the idea of the style football, but the results have been shocking. You know, for the best part of over a year now, their results have been like bottom 6. Bar his amazing start when he didn't lose in the first 10 games or whatever, the league results have been terrible. So you've got this kind of mismatch of one side, the results are okay, we don't like the style. The other side, the results are shit. But this is the style we want. But this is what we've been asking for. You know, this is what we've been crying out for. So it's quite an interesting contrast. In terms of, are you basically asking me who I think's better?
You don't
Is
have
that
to,
what
you
you're
don't
asking
have
me?
to answer it that way. If
No,
you
I
wanted
want
to,
you to
you're more than
answer it.
welcome
You want me
to.
to answer?
If you were, maybe
It shouldn't
here's a way to
take
view
that
it.
long.
As
That's
a
a
Villa
big problem.
supporter, if you were just presented with your next manager is going to be Andrew Maresca, who are you picking?
That's a shit choice. Don't click that one on the socials. Yeah.
No, we'll leave that out.
Maresca just.
Okay.
I think he's got a little bit more about him because I think
I'm glad we got this answer under protest.
Boy,
it's really difficult. That's one of your toughest questions you asked me.
that's a ringing endorsement if
Yeah.
I've ever heard one.
Nick, as you think about it, though,
Can I just choose Unai?
you can. You can say that you wouldn't take either. Perfectly fine. Good evening to you all. As we think about it, though, Maresca and Ange, for you, Nick, as you talk about maybe the specifics between the two, you know, we've had a chance now to view it from more Chelsea lens, a Chelsea perspective. We've seen Maresca maybe at his best. We've seen him maybe closer to his worst.
They both had fast starts,
Yep.
and I think both have kind of faded. And we saw Maresca fade a little bit last year at Leicester. So that's an interesting scenario. I mean, I think what I'm sensing from him, and I don't know if you're getting this from the press conferences or not, it feels more tense now. It
yeah,
feels,
for sure.
I mean, the questions are more direct from a lot, you know, the likes of you guys. But I also don't think that, you know, he's giving the same sorts of answers that he gave at the beginning of the season.
No, he was really open and punchy at the start of the season. He was, you know, the start of the season, the narrative was all about the players he was leaving out, the players who he wanted to get rid of or the club wanted to get rid of. He was just really open. It's quite refreshing. And he was really open. He felt quite relaxed, like he wasn't trying to hide anything. And I can't put my finger on when it changed, because it changed a little bit before this. But what I would say is the moment he suddenly admitted that the Champions League was the goal, having previously said the Champions League wasn't the goal.
This is like a month ago now, right? Like,
I feel it's a bit longer.
Longer?
Yeah, I feel it's
Okay.
longer. He seems like a man under pressure since he's had to almost say that publicly. And it's become very difficult to get answers out of him, get any kind of insight out of him. And it just feels like the pressure is built and built and built, and that he has sort of clammed up into it almost. And he has changed, because for the first 4 months, press-wise, I thought he was great. And he's completely different now.
So maybe kind of then taking a look at the squads. So you mentioned this idea of where the Chelsea squad is at, where the Spurs squad is at. We know that there are certain players available, unavailable on each of those teams. Who would you give the nod to in terms of overall squad?
Squad Chelsea. Squad Chelsea for sure. I think Tottenham's squad isn't good. But but first team, first 11, it's close. It's actually close.
Closer than you want.
Because obviously this is what Tottenham's problem is. The problem with Tottenham is if they get 2 or 3 injuries, they fall to pieces. They can't cope because the squad just can't cope. But their actual first 13 are good. Like, you know, Vicario is better than your goalkeepers.
All of them, yes.
All
correct.
of them. Yeah, we'll see if he's better than all of them. But at the moment, he's better than your first team goalkeepers. If you have Van der Ven and Romero both fit, they're better than your defenders, I would say, your central defenders.
really?
Yeah, I think they're top.
Interesting.
I think when those two are fit, they're top. Van der Ven, for me, having watched a lot of him, if he's fit, he's the best centre-back in the Premier League. He is phenomenal. And they are a better They
What?
are so much. They're a completely different team when he plays. Seriously.
Is that a full?
quick,
that's
but
a
is he
full
a great
disagree from you, right,
defender?
Nick? I just want to get
Is
that
he
on
a
the record.
great
Full
defender?
disagree.
Yeah, he
Really?
is. Yeah, he is.
Okay.
He's a phenomenal player.
Fullbacks.
Fullbacks, no.
Okay.
Fullbacks, no. Like Porro's a car crash.
Jesus.
Udogi's talented, but he's young and hot-headed.
Okay.
I'd have Cucurella over him any day of the week. Your midfield smashes their midfield. And then up front, it's interesting. Up front is you could make an argument either way. I think they're a different team when Solanke plays. He will miss chances, he's not prolific, but the way he holds the ball up for them and the way he presses for them changes their game. Son's not what he used to be, and they have a problem on the right. Kulusevski won't be fit for Thursday. His boots only just come off, so you don't have to worry about Kulusevski. Maddison's just up and down in terms of his performances. So I would take their centre-backs and their goalkeeper, basically, and after that. But their first 11, when they're all fit with Kulusevski in there, it's a good first 11. But their problem is the squad.
Nick, agree or disagree?
You'd have Son over whatever left winger we're throwing out there right
Probably
now.
would, but Son is not Son of...
No.
Son is not what we think of as Son.
But I think the rest, I would agree.
Yeah.
Van de Ven, best defender in
I mean, I would take Jackson over Solanke.
I'm not letting that go.
No,
That's crazy.
I'm telling you, it's not even a controversial opinion. Van der Ven is phenomenal.
I feel the controversy in myself.
Well, we'll revisit this on the Friday pod when we release
He's had
that
a
one.
good hamstring for like 6 months of his career.
But you can say that about Reece James. In that case,
Yeah.
you say Reece James is terrible.
Yeah, but I'm not calling him the best defender in the Premier League.
No, but Reece James, if you're going to qualify against injuries. But what I will say on Van der Ven, the good news is I don't think he can complete 90 minutes on Thursday. I think he'll start, and I think he'll have to come off around 60, 70. And then this is where the squad kicks in. Danso's average, Davis is old.
Yeah.
Archie Gray's actually very talented, but he's young and he's not really a defender.
Okay.
And I think we saw it in the Alkmaar Europa League game at home. I have to watch Tottenham games, you guys don't have to worry about it.
Thank fuck for that.
Van der Ven came off after about 60 minutes and they were comfortable. And the minute he came off, Alkmaar had about 3 or 4 great chances. So that's the good news as well. I think he will have to come off in the game.
So this episode will release before the match. So prediction on what the result will be?
I think Chelsea will win, but I think it will be a crazy game. I think like 3-2 or something.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. I think it'll be a crazy game because Tottenham just play like that.
Okay.
They play so high,
Yeah.
they will attack. Van der Ven will have to come off, there'll be chances. I don't think Chelsea are great defensively, so I just see a crazy game. And also Chelsea-Tottenham games are generally quite crazy games.
True.
Well, especially because they have nothing to lose.
Yeah, this is it. They're just going for pride.
Exactly.
At this
Like
point.
they can just go out there and play as crazy
Yeah.
as they want without any real consequence.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be. Unfortunately, I agree. I think it's not.
I mean,
gonna
I'm
be
going to have
fun.
great fun.
Yeah.
But, I think Chelsea will win, in which case you'll have great fun eventually.
Sure. Eventually, yeah, that's the right way to put it.
Well, let's switch gears and talk about things that are also great fun, which is recording a profit in the financial books for the last year.
I don't know if you guys are all about this, but that's basically why I'm here. Is
Yeah,
profits.
winning in the P&L table, the profit and loss table, Chelsea were able to have massive profits this year, Matt, but it came at a cost of selling the women's team to a holding group. Another little bit of financial trickery, a little bit of another using whatever assets available to try to make sure that Chelsea are good for another season.
Yeah, so, I mean, we knew this in July. I know it's come out in the accounts again
Yeah.
and it brings it back into focus again, but this wasn't a secret. We knew this in July, that they'd sold the women's team to themselves pretty much. And they didn't say this, but we all knew it was a PSR move. I'm not going to say trick because it's not like they haven't broken
They're
any
within
rules.
the rules of
Everyone
what
plays
is
by the same
allowed
rules,
within
yeah.
the game.
And what is important to note is that after the selling the hotels to themselves previous year, the Premier League did have a vote on this in June, and they put it out to vote about whether clubs can sell assets back to themselves and all that. And it only got 11 votes to try and stop it, close the loophole. So, and you need 14 basically. So enough clubs are on board with this. And the reason enough clubs are on board with this is because if you closed this supposed loophole, it would also stop clubs bringing concerts into PSR calculations. So Tottenham have license to stage 30 non-football events at their stadium. Beyonce's doing 6 dates this summer. I know because my daughter wants to go. They have all the NFL games, and that creates a massive revenue for them. Tottenham also are allowed on their PSR to put through the go-karting they now have under the stadium. That would again be closed if you closed all of this loophole, because it wouldn't just take into account selling back stuff. It would kind of be like non-football profit that you can put on PSR. So that's why a lot of clubs wouldn't vote for it, because it would actually bring in a lot of clubs who are trying to make money outside the normal football. I mean, I don't see a huge problem with it. I know that it's easy to think this is ridiculous, but PSR for me is ridiculous. Like, it's not thought through well. It doesn't work well. It punishes the wrong people. It gives advantages to the wrong people. But that's a whole different issue. In the current set of rules and the way they are, I just think they've been quite clever. And what they're lucky in, and this is their good fortune, but again, there's no reason why they shouldn't play on this good fortune. Their good fortune is that they've bought a club where various parts of the club, the assets, hotels, women's team, potentially in the future, maybe the training ground, were at such a level that they can now use this to their advantage. So they've got the previous owners to thank for that, because they didn't. But, you know, they've done it. And what was also interesting about the headline figures on the accounts, and we don't have the actual accounts yet. If you go on HMRC, you can't see the breakdown, so it's hard to make huge conclusions on it. But basically the trading profit on sales and buys, 153 million, 152.8 million. That's massive. I think that's a record. And you can either see that as a good thing or a bad thing. You can make arguments that makes them a selling club, or you can make arguments that makes them a very clever club and good sellers. And in PSR world, every club has to be good sellers, otherwise you're not going to pass PSR. So I thought that was interesting too.
Well, and Nick, we've seen that for maybe even years now, where some of our best players, like selling players, has been a part of Chelsea's model for
a while,
creating revenue to offset some of the challenges they have, whether that's the stadium size, whether that's some of the commercial opportunities, to ensure that they can be competitive across multiple scenarios.
Just to interrupt on that, so in the last 10 years, Chelsea's trading profits are at about, I think they're just under £1 billion now. I think they're at something like 900 million over the last 10 years. I think the next highest is something like 500 million. I mean, for the last 10 years, they've just killed the opposition on that. And that has what's helped keep them at the top until, recently.
Thanks for that. One thing that we were just doing the stadium tour, for those who did that the other day, that Adam Burge reminded me of, is the number of days that Chelsea can actually hold events at Stamford Bridge because of the local council, right? So Tottenham does have a huge advantage in that regard, because they can throw whatever event whenever they want. And Chelsea have a very limited window. Like, once the final match day goes, they have like 2 other days until they're back in August. And it does make a huge difference in terms of what you're able to do.
And not just against Tottenham, Villa are holding about 10 concerts this summer. West Ham have started holding loads of concerts because they've got the Olympics. So it's a lot of clubs can do this now. And Chelsea, because of the geography of the stadium and the area they're in, they can't do that. So they do have to look for other ways.
I guess one thing that I'm kind of considering throughout all the selling and buying and financial results is, like, Chelsea have obviously had to sell academy talent or players that cost them very little to bring up to sell for a max profit, right? Pure profit, FC. What are your thoughts on the sustainability of that practice? Because, like, I think one of the things that I have trouble with in my mind, candidly, is you're buying these youngsters from Sporting Lisbon in a couple of summers. You obviously have the Kendrys and such coming this summer. Aren't you just kind of trading young players at that point for different levels of cash?
I think at the moment, though, that's the way Chelsea are doing it, potentially a bigger a bigger ratio than other clubs, but I think PSR has forced clubs into that. I mean, I think most clubs now are trading operations to some degree.
Okay.
I think most clubs will try to have players that they bring in and don't even necessarily think they'll ever really play for the first team and put them out on loan and try and increase their value. And remember, obviously, in terms of PSR, if you sign a player, the cost is spread, and if you sell a player, the amount you get can immediately go onto the account, the full amount.
Yeah.
So even if you're signing a player for, say, 15 million, sending him out on loan, and you're selling him a year down the line for, say, 20 million, it doesn't look like a great profit, but in terms of your PSR, that's actually quite a good win.
Well, that works for your Diego Moreiras, right? Which you pick up for a couple of quid, right? But not for players that you're going to spend 60 million pounds on who are 17 and unproven, and you're going to try and have to either make them into the superstars that you think they can be, which is a valid quest, or eventually sell them for more than what you paid for them.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really challenging thing to do.
Yeah, it is. It is, but that's...
Is that a risky operation?
Isn't there a risk in all of this, though?
Sure, but like you're taking bigger and bigger swings, and you're undercutting the academy.
There's probably also less risk in that than signing someone for £80 million who's aged 27, and if they can't make that immediate impact,
Fair enough.
That's the money gone, and you're never getting that money back ever. So
what happens to the old dogs that can't hunt? They're just done?
You just got to recruit well.
Yeah.
I mean, the pressure is to recruit well. And I think the other thing is it's a numbers game. You know, if you sign... I hear what you're saying in terms of the level of the purchases. You've pulled out two of the bigger ones. But if you're signing so many, out of 10, if one ends up being a Cole Palmer or even a Nicholas Jackson, like... you're guaranteed if you have to and you want to, you're going to make a huge return on that player, which will cover bits and bobs of the rest of it, like many times over. Chelsea are an easy example because of the way they're doing it in the terms of the numbers, the amount they're spending, and also the amount of players they're signing. But actually, it's not that much different from a lot of clubs. They're just not doing it at the same level. All clubs now are trading machines. And it's not even that new. Monchi made a name for himself at Seville of doing this. Seville every year, buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell, trade, and that's how they became successful. It's not actually completely new.
You know, we talked about different levers that Chelsea might have to try and get ahead or get back in the game related to financial elements. One of the things we mentioned, particularly we're staying right near the West Brompton station. You know, obviously the stadium conversation is a huge part of this for Chelsea on what they will or won't do over the next 12, 18, 24 months. We've heard a lot from the new ownership about the investment, the $1.5 billion to kind of set aside for stadium development as a part of the moving into Chelsea.
Yeah.
Where do you see that? When do you feel like the next big update comes on that for Chelsea supporters? Is it sometime this summer, post understanding where this team's future is heading, or do you feel like we're still a little further out from understanding where Chelsea are going to be in a new stadium?
Well, I know that certain people who have had discussions with the decision makers at Chelsea, I've got to be a bit careful what I say, have been left with the impression that there will be news this summer. I haven't heard that personally. I've always felt that it's going to be very dependent on what happens with the ownership. And obviously Todd Bowley kind of spoke to that the other day. But I mean, what I can say is it's only two options. The sort of tarting up of Stamford Bridge, the making it just a bit nicer and redesigning a few stands, that's been put off the table. You forget about that. It's just not worth it. What you spend having to do that is just not worth the return you can get on it. So that's completely off. So it's either knock down Stamford Bridge and rebuild on the exact same site, or it's move, and really there's only Earls Court, and obviously you have the fact that there's already an Earls Court development thing going on in any case. They're really the only options. And while the end result, you can make arguments for and against both. In terms of weighing up both projects, there's a hell of a lot of problems in both projects. Like if you pick the remain on Stamford Bridge site and knock it down, you're looking at 5 to 6 years away from Stamford Bridge.
Yeah.
Wembley being the only realistic option, and yet I'm told it's not even definite they would be allowed Wembley for that amount of time with all the events on at Wembley. They don't have an agreement on that, and I'm told it's not certain they could get one. You'd also have to shut Fulham Road for a long time, or part of Fulham Road for a long time to do that.
Yep.
In terms of just getting in people and vehicles and everything to actually bring out the rubble and just do the whole thing. And the residents aren't going to like that, quite understandably. And then, obviously, if you move, you're leaving Stamford Bridge, and I can't imagine Villa leaving Villa Park. I'd hate it. So I can totally get why that is a very difficult decision for people, and it would have to go through the Chelsea pitch owners, would have to give the green light, and you also still have the challenge of getting in on that Earls Court development project, which is quite a long way down the line. So neither are easy or good options in terms of getting to the end result. I couldn't tell you where it's going to end, and I don't think, for all certain people think that there will be some sort of clarity this summer. I would be surprised if there's clarity this summer, because I think it's very clear from what Todd said that Todd would like a multi-sport venue. Well, quite frankly, in the confines of what you can do on the current site, I don't think that's hugely realistic at Stamford Bridge. So I'm presuming Todd wants to move. The Clear Lake side haven't really given any indication that they're interested in anything but football. And I think they are of a more short-term view of the goals they want to reach and how they want to reach them. And I think they think that their goals will be impacted quite severely by the knock-on effects of trying to move. So I think there's a difference of opinion there. And I really think until we know which way the ownership's going, I just don't see there being a definitive answer. I think it will get kicked down the road.
Do you feel like there's an answer coming on the ownership piece this summer then?
I feel like it's got to come to a head. And I feel like Todd left that out there a little bit. I can't believe he didn't do that for a reason. I just can't believe that you say in a conference style situation that is getting filmed for Bloomberg, that you leave this little thing hanging about the fact that this could be what defines the ownership without really knowing what that might do. So I do feel like it has to come to a head, but I don't know how, because at the end of the day, for one side to buy the other side out, you need to find 1.5 billion at least. And Todd made it very clear as well, which I also thought was interesting in that interview, that he feels, that Chelsea are worth more now than what they paid for them. Again, that was almost like putting a little valuation on his side of things for me. So, yeah, I don't know where it's heading. It is probably concerning for Chelsea fans. I'd be interested, actually, and I know this isn't great podcast fodder.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Who would, in this room, favour moving away from Stamford Bridge?
That's probably less than 10%, maybe just at 10%.
Nah, you're right.
It's a small number, isn't
yeah.
it?
It's the minority.
Yeah. And fair play, I'm not trying to make anything out of that. I'm just interested because I know the CPO feel that 5 years ago, if you'd have put it to a CPO vote, it would be absolute no chance of moving, literally no chance. I know they feel that the shareholding has changed slightly and it would be closer than in the past. And they're not quite so sure how it would go now, which is why I kind of was quite interested to see a show of hands on that.
I think the case for moving is the fact that the area that you need is just simply not there. Even if you tear down the historic Stoll building, which is just right next door, it still makes a really difficult scenario with the train lines. And that's not anybody's fault. It's just the way that it looks right now and the way that they rebuilt it in the 90s. It's a part of the consideration, and it's probably going to be cheaper to build a new one than retrofit or completely tear down and build back in the same spot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there is a pretty clear case for it, and it's one tube stop down.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I try and look at it from my own perspective. If
It's not what I want, but that's the case for it.
I mean, look, if Villa left Villa Park, I wouldn't go anymore.
Really?
No.
Not at all.
I would support Villa. I'd watch them on the telly. But that for me would be like, I'm not paying money to go to a different stadium. Fuck that.
Interesting.
Right, and
That
I
one
can,
might get clipped.
and you can happily clip that because that is my honest view. If Villa moved from Villa Park, I wouldn't go. I'd have no interest. I'd support the team. I'd watch on telly. In terms of paying to go and taking the trouble to go, it would mean nothing to me. I may as well watch them play at the London Stadium. Like it would just mean nothing to me. But I am a traditionalist. I've said on your pod on lots of different subjects. I'm always a traditionalist, and I respect both views. Completely respect both views. What I hate about, and coming back to what we were talking about PSR, what I fucking hate about PSR is that PSR is forcing clubs to make these decisions.
Yeah.
PSR is forcing clubs to sell their academy players and to think about having to move from their traditional homes, and that's just not right. It's rubbish.
I also think like Stamford Bridge is 40 some odd thousand, right? I think it can max at 42. But to even go up to 65 is only a difference of like 20,000 seats, right? And like to make the money back on the stadium that you would have to put into it, which is going to be over $1 billion. There's no doubt about it, especially in this part of London, right?
Yeah.
Like it's going to take years and years and years and years to ever like justify the expense, other than the fact that you want to have more people there and just get the ticket revenue for the year accounting. So it's the numbers and the borrowing costs are absurd right now. The interest rates are high, and it's not easy to build, and the materials are not always readily available. If you wanted to start tomorrow, you can. It's just going to be difficult.
Yeah.
So either way, it sucks. There's no easy answer.
Yeah, there is no easy answer, and I can kind of see why there's no immediate. Having them made this huge thing about it when they were bidding to take over the club because it was obviously a big issue.
Yeah.
I can also see why they've got in and looked at it and thought, you know what, we'll just kick this can down the road a little while because there's not a great answer for this and there's not a great solution for all this. But it's going to be the single biggest thing in Chelsea's modern history of what they decide to do and whether it ends up being the best decision or whether it ends up not being the best decision.
Do you feel like this current ownership structure has learned lessons from the past? Let's just call out 2011 as a very real example that says, okay, if we want to do this, we're going to have to approach it in the right way, and we're going to have to sell a vision if we want to move, and we can justify moving to the CPO that would get them to vote at whatever the percentage is, 80+%, that would say yes.
I don't know. I mean, there's a man sitting in the front here who might disagree with me on this, but I didn't think the Abramovich Stadium would ever be built. I didn't. I always felt that was never getting built. Just like I feel like
It didn't fail by that much, though.
No, but not from that point of view. I just thought that it looked incredible. The drawings were incredible. Yes, they got the planning permission, but practically I couldn't see a world in which that was actually ever getting built. And I don't know. I mean, similarly with the Man U, the Man U stadium thing's interesting because I mean, I could literally
For more than one reason.
no, but I could literally sit here now. If someone passed me a pen and paper, I'd just draw a stadium and hand it in and say, "Here's our new stadium, guys. Doesn't this look great?" And try and forget about our results right now because that's all they've really done. They haven't presented a plan of funding that stadium.
It comes with circus music, which I think is really cool.
But there's nothing real about that stadium yet. They've literally drawn a picture and said to everyone, look over here because we don't want you to look over there where everything's like burning down.
For the love of God, don't look over here.
So someone said to me the other day, the Man U thing's put pressure on Chelsea. I'm like, are you serious? Like Chelsea tomorrow could hold a press conference and they have pictures. They have pictures and drawings and plans of different stadiums of what they could do at Stamford Bridge and what they could do at Oz Court. Those pictures are in existence. Yeah. And they could hold a press conference if they wanted to and show everyone those pictures and get everyone either very excited or very angry, depending on which side of the fence you sit on. But it's more responsible not to do that, just as a diversion technique, which I feel like the Man U thing is. I just find it so hard to talk about because I just don't know which way it's going to go on the Chelsea Stadium. But it's massive. It's absolutely.
I want
massive.
your way too early prediction right now, Matt. Where is it going?
No,
No. Here's what we're going to
possibly.
do.
Matt's court. That's what he said. It's unbelievable.
We know that Matt's a traditionalist. He's mentioned it a couple times in this episode that we're recording now. I want to talk about the types of competitions that get you as a traditionalist excited, which is the Club World Cup coming up this summer.
That's right. The number one competition in the world, baby. Let's go.
When you put this on the running order, I thought, I'm not the guy for this tonight. I'm not the guy for the Club World Cup chat.
It's all about cash, baby. Let's go.
I do want to frame it, though, and we talked about a couple of things that are important to the ownership group. We know that obviously there's a lot of money on the table if you were able to go the distance and win it. How important do you see Chelsea, maybe the ownership group, viewing the Club World Cup heading up? And I think then that leads into a conversation around what happens with this exceptional transfer window that is going to be instituted to allow the signing and registration of players to potentially move Chelsea a little bit further than they typically go, or faster rather than they typically go, to bring players in to reinforce, to set up, to be ready for this 35-man squad competition that they have coming up.
So I think the Club World Cup with the money, so basically through competing in it, Chelsea guaranteed just through competing it around kind of £60 million, something like that. And that, on a very base level to start with, will make up for the fact they haven't had a front of shirt sponsor all season. And I think that's been factored into the gamble on this front of shirt sponsor in terms of waiting, hoping and praying that they get in the Champions League to try and get a big long-term sponsor, turning down other things. I think the eyes must have been on the fact we have this exceptional revenue coming in from the Club World Cup that can actually make up cover us
that we
on that.
didn't earn or any other thing.
Well,
we
again,
just
they're
grandfathered into.
Well, again, they're profiting from the last regime, and they can count themselves very lucky for that. And so I think that has accounted partly for the fact they don't have the sponsorship. They are taking it incredibly seriously. I mean, ever since last summer, they've been talking about squad planning around the Club World Cup. They absolutely want to go and win it. I mean, if you win it, you're looking at kind of 110 million, potentially, something like that. And that some clubs will take it seriously and some clubs won't. Pep says he's going to play golf there. But if they don't win anything if they don't win the FA Cup now, and if they fall out the Champions League, I suspect he won't be playing quite as much golf as he's promising to, and all of a sudden it'll become a bigger deal for them.
Back 9 versus the full 18.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier to say that at the moment, but it's a big deal for Chelsea. Like, they see it as a big deal, and obviously being in America with American owners is huge for them. And they also see it as an opportunity to bring players back from on loan, get players integrated into the first team. They see it as a better environment than a normal pre-season tour, which actually it probably is in terms of competitive.
Yep.
And I think ideally they probably would, because of this weird split transfer window, ideally if they can, they probably would like to take a signing out there with them, because again, that would boost interest, that would boost hype, which usually equals money, which usually, everything on that. So I think if they can, they will try and do an early transfer to take out with them.
Well, let me ask you this. Like, it's obviously a tournament that's happening in June after a long-ass season, right? Barely any recovery between the end of the season until, June 20th, something like that?
It's like 3 weeks or something, isn't there?
Do you feel like the squad depth, the 35-man squad, is going to be utilized all the way to the max? Or do you feel like Chelsea, just given the current situation, the players that have performed this season, are going to be relying upon a select few to really make an impact?
I think it'll depend a bit as well. It'll depend a bit on what this season finishes like. Because if they've qualified for the Champions League, they've got to be careful. They can't just sort of
it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of planning,
but they do have a lot of players to plan with. So
more than most.
I think it will depend slightly on where they end. If they end disappointingly this season, then I think there will be a smaller pool that they really go for it to try and rescue something out of the season. If they qualify for the Champions League, that takes the pressure off it slightly. They did with Man City apply to the Premier League to start the Premier League season late, which shows they have a concern about the impact it will have. And the Premier League quite correctly said, no chance, you start when everybody else starts. But that does show that they do know that it could impact the start of the season, because it is like 3 weeks. There's basically no...
How could it not?
Yeah, because these guys are going to... I think under FIFA rules, you have to give the players at least 2 weeks off. So some players who play... If they get to the end of the Club World Cup, some of these players are basically going to have a week off and no real... They'll have had a... The Club World Cup will kind of provide a pre-season, but it also won't provide a pre-season because it's so competitive. So they'll kind of go into it in no pre-season. It's going to be risky for clubs. It'll be really interesting how it impacts them. And I think how Chelsea and City cope next season will define how seriously other English clubs end up taking this Club World Cup moving forwards. If City and Chelsea flunk at the start of the season and it kills their first couple of months and they have terrible injury problems, clubs are just going to run scared of this Club World Cup. If they can cope with it,
Despite the money?
but the managers will run from it.
Okay.
And
All right.
But they can set a standard for like, oh, if you can do this well,
If
you
you
can
can
make a
do
lot
it
of
well,
money
totally.
and you
Yeah.
don't injure your players.
Yeah, if you can do it well and you can find a way of doing it, then it will help grow the Club World Cup essentially.
Because a normal preseason tour doesn't bring nearly the revenue.
God,
I mean,
no,
yeah.
no chance.
So, I don't know.
So as you think about it, are there any players that you would anticipate from either the loan situation or for players that are signed that would be, that they would want to register early to be involved with the Club World Cup?
Well, I think they've pretty much everyone who they've either signed or is out on loan, I think they've accounted for the fact they can play in the Club World Cup. Someone might be able to pick me up on something on that, but if not all, the vast majority. So certainly all the players out on loan. So I would expect Andre Santos to be part of the Club World Cup squad.
Nick is very excited.
Yeah. At least one of the goalkeepers out of Petrovic and Penders, if not both.
Everyone's excited.
Will go to the Club World Cup. The lad coming in from Strasbourg, the defender, is it Sarr? Mamadou Sarr? I think he will go to the Club World Cup. I don't know for sure on Esteval. I don't know for sure. Kendry Paez definitely, I think, will go to the Club World Cup. He's in England now. He's basically staying in England. He's doing some training at Strasbourg. He's training at Chelsea. He's not going. There we go. He's not going back now at any point. He is over here. He is being integrated, and he will be part of that Club World Cup as well. So yeah, there'll be a lot of opportunity for some of those players who have pre-signed to join next season, who can register in time for that, and also players who are out on loan who they've made sure the loans end early enough to. I think even Joao Felix can.
There we go.
All right.
The missing
Yeah.
piece.
You're going to win the Club World Cup, guys. Joao Felix is going to play. Did anyone see the Kyle Walker clip today? Yeah. Kyle Walker in the tunnel. They're going out and to the Las Malango. And Kyle Walker basically says to him in impressive Spanish or Portuguese, I'm not sure which it was, says to him basically, you can pass. we don't have any Lionel Messis in this squad, e.g. including you, so it'd be good if you passed.
So you're saying it's not gone well?
It's not gone well.
Yeah.
After the first game when he scored, and after that it's gone.
You did mention a couple names that are kind of interesting because you have put out a recent story talking about the end of the season evaluation that this Chelsea team and organization is going to do, particularly when it comes to goalkeeping.
Yes.
Because
come on,
we can applaud for that.
Just me? Okay.
Because as it turns out, it is not a good idea to go into a match with a hologram as a goalkeeper. Not a good idea. Petrovic and Penders potentially entering back into the conversation. Chelsea feeling comfortable in the fact that between those two, Sanchez, Georgie, that there's some type of combination that can take them into next season. What's your understanding on where that actually sits?
They're going to have a full goalkeeping review. Basically,
including goalkeeping coach?
Not that I've heard of.
Okay.
Around those four goalkeepers, basically. And what they want to get to is they want to get to who are going to be the number one and number two, or number ones. They want to decide which one to go out on loan, and one will leave permanently.
Okay.
I can hear everyone whispering. Or it
Very loud whisper.
Begins with S, yeah. And they haven't. I know there's been a few reports of they will not sign a goalkeeper. I haven't been told that. I've been told they don't expect to sign a goalkeeper. A, they don't expect a goalkeeper, a kind of superstar goalkeeper, to be available. And B, well, A and B is basically that. But what I would say is, I have been told if there is an opportunity arises and something changes around a superstar goalkeeper, not to completely dismiss it. So I would say at the moment probably 85% I don't think they're going to sign a goalkeeper, because I've got to agree, I don't really see where a world-class goalkeeper is going to come up for sale from. But if it does, that might change things. So they're looking at the four they've got. They think they can get a combination of the four. Petrovic and Penders are going to be given as much chance as anybody else in that. Everyone's going to start from a level playing field in terms of the evaluation. And look, what's clear to me is Penders clearly isn't getting sold. No chance, absolutely no chance. Jorgensen is not getting sold after 1 year. No chance. So out of Petrovic and Sanchez, one of those is going to end up one of the first two goalkeepers, and one of them is getting sold. I think I probably know where this room falls on this.
Big Sanchez group here.
Yeah, a lot of Sanchez supporters.
There's a couple Sanchez shirts out there.
I mean, look, I think they've got the goalkeeping situation horribly wrong this season. I really do. It's my one area of I've criticised lots of different little areas, but this is my one area of major criticism for them. I think they've been slightly unlucky on the strikers with the injuries. I think they've got the goalkeeping situation horribly wrong. But what I would say is I think Petrovic's loan is going to ensure that he comes back a better goalkeeper, because I don't think Petrovic staying and being a sort of number two stroke maybe number one with Sanchez in and out, I don't think that would have done him a lot of good. I actually think this loan has been good for him. He will come back a better goalkeeper. He'll come back a different goalkeeper as well. He's played a different style of football under Rossignol as to what he did under Pochettino, and it could end up being beneficial in the long term to Petrovic. But they've messed the goalkeeping situation up until now, and they can't keep messing it up. Conte used to wonderfully say, you can get your wife wrong, but you can't get your striker or your goalkeeper wrong. That was his great quote. Very sexist.
One of many.
Very sexist, but, funny.
Nick, what's your way too early prediction on what the goalkeeping situation looks like next season, based upon that?
I don't know. I feel like this could be wrong, but I feel like
Matt will tell you if you're wrong, by the way.
Once they make a decision about a player, i.e. sending Petrovic out on loan, that pretty much signifies what they want to do. And I would also not be surprised if they sold Andre Santos either. I think that there's a real chance that happens. It's not what I want. It's not what I would do. I'm not in charge. So I'm kind of fascinated to see what happens out of this review, because there are such clear deficiencies with the two that they have. I don't know if a year in France is going to be enough to convince them that, at a league that's significantly lower level than the Premier League, that this is the right guy. Maybe. And Penders is 18 or 19 years old. So they still don't have a goalkeeper out of 4, probably. Although I would probably take Petrovic in my team. I mean,
I agree.
They bought poorly, and now they're paying the price for it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the strategy around the goalkeeper has just gone wrong, and I think it's going to be difficult from here. I quite like Petrovic, and I think if he has a good Club World Cup, that would give him a very good chance. Petrovic or Sanchez is going to get sold. One of them.
Don't you feel like they made their bet already, though? They bet on Sanchez?
Maybe here's a better question: where do you sell Sanchez? What's the market after you watch the tape?
Can we get a GoFundMe together?
Look, you're just giving over here. We have to be very specific about the cultural differences.
Sorry about that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult. You'd certainly think you'd have more buyers for Petrovic.
Yeah.
Like Mamardashvili is going to Liverpool,
Yeah.
right? Allison's probably not going anywhere.
No.
So
So you want Kelleher? Is that what you're saying?
I would take him.
Yeah.
I don't think that's remotely controversial to say. He's been great for them.
I mean, the interesting thing is the Leicester goalkeeper, but I'm told that they think he's too small, that they don't think he's good enough in the air.
And yet
But-
they buy Jorgensen?
Look, I'm a fully paid-up member of the fact that they've messed up the goalkeeping situation.
Me too.
And it's going to put them in a difficult spot for a while, I think.
Well, other areas where there will need to be reinforcement, and people ask a lot about this idea of what happens at the top of the top of the formation, striker's perspective. We know we talked about Nico Jackson previously and what he's been able to do, kind of a minimum return on investment there. But I think the strong kind of year-over-year performance that he was able to have from Villarreal to Chelsea. Where do you view the striker conversation heading this summer?
So, Liam Delap is definitely on the radar, not just of the manager, but the club like him as well as the manager. The manager obviously has a link to him and likes him. I think he's a good player, but I also think he's not a development player, but he's not anywhere near the finished article, and he's not a sure bet either.
How much are we talking fee-wise?
Well, the interesting thing is, on my way here, there was a report out saying that he has a release clause if they go down, which they will, of 40 million. I don't know.
Oh, a bargain deal for
Yeah.
private equity?
Well,
Sign me up.
Let's go, baby. That's pure profit waiting to happen.
In which case, it becomes very attractive in the model. I don't know whether that's true. I was literally on the tube here when I saw that pop on my phone, so I haven't checked it out. You've then got Sesko, who also has a release clause. I think, though, there's going to be a lot of competition for Sesko, and I think that will be, if you look at the model of this ownership, they don't tend to go bidding against other people. They don't tend to go into auction. I don't think they like the idea of the fee being pushed up by auction, so I think that's less likely. I think Osimhen is still a possibility as well. I don't think that's completely off the table. And I'm sure there's probably a couple of others I'm not aware of, but they're the three that I'm certain are on a list. And Osimhen, you would say, out of all of them, is the kind of more the finished article, more the sure bet.
Yeah.
But someone like Delap maybe is a better fit of what you see what they're doing.
It kind of depends on what you want to do, right? If you want to keep Nico as number one and you're trusting him to continue year-on-year improvement, assuming he kind of finishes the year well, he went on a bit of a dip. But I think if he gets up to 18, 19 goal contributions, 20, pretty decent year over year, not bad, then Delap makes sense. No problem there. But if you want to potentially have a number 9 leading the line in a traditional sense, and maybe move Nico out to left wing, which we saw him do successfully, given that your winger opportunities are relatively limited, despite the about 12 of them, then there could be an option there too. And it doesn't really help your depth situation, but depends on what the club want to do with him.
I mean, I'm guessing here, I can see a scenario as well where they sell Nico this summer.
Fucking hell.
Well, that is not something we've covered on a previous episode, that's for sure.
You're getting
I'm getting
booed.
booed, man. It's not my decision.
It's because the beer is almost empty. That's why you're getting food. No more.
I mean, look, it's a guess.
That hurts my heart, that one. I don't like
It's a guess, but depending on what they do with the striker coming in, like you say, and how they go with it, I don't really see now a scenario where Nico moves out to the left and that becomes his position, and I don't think Nico would particularly accept that.
Really?
I could see a scenario where if someone came in with a good bid for Nico, that they'd consider selling him. That is a guess. That is my own personal theory.
Boo.
Boo my guess. Boo my guess.
You're still left short, though. You're still left short in that position that we're already short in, and we were clearly short because Pedro Neto is, despite the effort, not a striker.
Yeah. They like Gui, who's currently injured. Gui, whatever. Mark.
He's not
They
a
like
user
Mark.
interface. He's an
Mark
actual
of the
player.
sea.
They like Mark.
Yep.
And he's not going anywhere. We'll see what happens. I think the strike will be very interesting. I think they'll 100% sign a striker, and I think that it could have impacts elsewhere in terms of who goes out.
Does the fact if we make the Champions League matter in the level of striker that we sign?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Whether you make the Champions League matters to a lot of things
Yes.
in terms of the level of players you bring in, whether you need to trade as much outwise to bring in, the type of depth of squad you need. It makes a massive difference.
Okay.
Yeah, huge.
So as we were talking, I did intersperse a fair number of listener questions throughout the conversation we had related to Summer Club World Cup. There was one question that didn't really sit in there well, and it asked the question, which sacking or departure under this new ownership group with Tuchel, Potter, Pochettino felt the most unjust was the way that the listener tried to frame it.
It's easy. It's Potter. Because Potter got the Real Madrid tie taken off him, which was harsh. Because however badly things were going in the Premier League, he deserved that Real Madrid tie. He did well in the Champions League. He got a great victory over Dortmund. The atmosphere at that home tie against Dortmund was fantastic. He had earned that Real Madrid tie. The other thing about Potter is the promises around Potter, both made to him and made externally, about the project and the time and everything else. And Potter at that point, remember, there was nothing to go on off this ownership. There was no history to go off in terms of, well, they say this and they do this and you shouldn't trust. He had none of that. There was no reason for him not to trust them. He was going to be their guy no matter what. And they reneged on that. And Potter definitely. Tuchel seems the harshest because of his results, but most ownerships end up making a fairly fast change when they take over clubs of managers because they want their own guy. They don't want the guy who is wedded to a different way of working. Tuchel absolutely loved working in the last setup where he basically had Roman, who didn't really deal with anything at that point. So he basically had Mourinho and Petr Cech, and he loved the simplicity of the ownership. He was left to do his job. He felt it was very adult. He wasn't being questioned. Looking back, it was just never going to work for him with a new ownership coming in who didn't really understand what they were doing, wanted to ask lots of questions, wanted to be hands-on. And he wasn't promised anything either. That's the difference between him and Potter. Tuchel wasn't given any promises. All the promises, and Chelsea would admit this now, they would admit that they were harsh to not give Potter the Real Madrid game. It was really, really harsh. Broken promises is probably too strong, but they reneged on what had been said to him. Pochettino knew what he was signing up for. By the time Potter had gone, Pochettino knew what he was signing up for. That's why I don't think that one's harsh.
And we like, did you have a thought, Nick?
I was going to say, people.
Yeah.
No, I think everyone knows how I felt about Tuchel at the end, but I think the Potter thing, you look back at the Real Madrid result, it was never going to happen. We were killed in those fixtures. I mean, it was.
But he had literally earned. I don't think he lost a Champions League game, did he? He was unbeaten in the Champions League. We lost Dortmund first leg, but tie-wise,
yeah.
And
would it have made a difference?
I don't know, but
probably not.
The most ridiculous thing is that the change that they made, and look, people who listen to the pod and people who know me know that I love Frank Lampard.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. He's an incredible player. He's an absolute legend of the game. I still think he'll go on to make a good head coach. But the change they made at that time was never going to positively impact anything.
Of course not. No.
So also, it was a demeaning change to say, we believe the guy who's been sacked by Everton, who's had a very difficult run of managerial jobs, is going to somehow come in and do a better job. It was also demeaning to Potter's work. I felt it was really kind of disrespectful and shitty of them to do it to Potter at that point. End of the season, fine. Or go out to Real Madrid, do it then, fine. To not give him the Real Madrid tie, I just thought was really, really harsh.
Well, let's take away from harsh stories then, because you've covered Chelsea for a bit of time now.
I think I was trying to work this out. I think about 12 years. Yeah.
Okay, 12 years. We'd love an opportunity to put on record just a story in terms of to save it for the future. You'd share it with your kids later at some point. Be like, hey, when I was covering Chelsea, I had this story.
Kids
I really enjoyed it, and they may not. Who knows? My dad was on the podcast.
Again, won't give a shit.
What's the story that you find maybe most interesting in the time that you've had a chance to cover Chelsea, I mean, you've seen so much over 12 years, multiple ownerships, multiple managers, tons of players being successful, tons of players being sold, no front of kit sponsor, front of kit sponsors. There's been a lot that you've had a chance to take in. Is there anything that pops to mind for you as either a favorite moment or favorite story from your time covering Chelsea?
I don't know if it's a favourite, but one that always sticks out was, God, it's 10 years ago now. So 2015, Mourinho, second coming of Mourinho. They had lost 3-1 at Everton, I think, in like a September or something, 2015. It obviously went on to become that season where everything unravelled. And they lost at home to Everton. No, lost away to Everton, and they had a Champions League game the midweek. I think it was against Tel Aviv. A relatively, what you would think, easy home game coming up. And the Everton game had been a disaster. And I went to the pre-match press conference. So let's say it was a Wednesday night game. I'd have been going on the Tuesday to Cobham. I often go on the train to Cobham because driving there from where I live is a nightmare. So I get off at Cobham train station and I've accidentally gone too early. I've got the train earlier than I normally would get and I've got quite a lot of time to kill. So I walk up has anyone been to Cobham train station here? Yeah. So it's very, very, like, as you come off the train to Cobham, the training ground is literally on your left-hand side. Literally, there's a row of trees and then there's the training complex. And you come up some stairs and cross a bridge. And when you come up to the top of the stairs, the training ground is literally just sort of below you. So I come up the stairs to cross the bridge and there was a group of Chelsea fans stood at the top of the bridge. And I had just a lot of time to kill. So I went up there and just kind of said hi. And I was a bit like, what are you guys doing? Like, why are you? And they're like, Jose's got them. They've several training pitches at the training ground, but there's one literally next to the train station. So these guys said, Jose's got them training just here. We're watching training. You can watch training. Like I say, it was maybe like October time, not a lot of leaves on the trees, and you could just get a clear view. He'd put them on the training pitch right next to it. So they were all watching training. And I just said, oh, what's going on? And I said, oh, we think you can tell what team he's playing. And I was like, really? So I stood up there and sure enough, he'd set out two teams, one in like bright pink bibs, one in not bibs, and one team was very clearly the team because he'd put them out in formation, he was going around talking to them, and the other team were having to do little exercises around them. And it was very obvious he wasn't interested in one set of players and he was very interested in the other set of players. And what was striking about the team in the bibs was that John Terry wasn't in it and Diego Costa wasn't in it. So I'm like, oh, that's a story. He's dropped Terry and Costa. Terry had had a nightmare at Everton and a bad start to the season. And it was the season in which Costa started playing up, basically. And two big players look like they're going to be dropped. So I go along to the press conference, and sure enough, Jose starts talking like he's thinking about making changes. So I'm thinking, yeah, that's the team. So I ring my office at the end of the press conference. And I said, I think I've got a good story, but I'm not sure about it ethically. Like, right, explain to us what's happened.
Using binoculars, and I saw the team.
So I basically said, look, this is what happened. And they said, were you trespassing? No, I stood on the top of a bridge. Were you using binoculars or hiding in bushes? No, I'm literally stood on the top of a bridge in a public area. He's got them. There's no problem, like ethically, there is literally no problem with that. So we run the story as it ended up being the back page, although at the time I think we had a sport pullout, so it was like the front page of the sport pullout. Jose's set to drop Terry and Costa. His last training session before it lined up this. Anyway, bang. I get to the game the next night. About probably 2 hours before kickoff. Sorry, is this really long-winded?
No, this is great.
I get to the game 2 hours before kickoff, as I normally do. And the minute I walk in, someone from the Chelsea comms team is waiting for me and literally
There's
says...
a sign with your name on it?
Yeah, come with me. And marches me straight out the press room into the tunnel area. And immediately I think, oh, for fuck's sake. I'm in trouble here. It didn't take a genius there. So the first thing they ask is, where did you get that story? I'm like, so it's right then? Because the team sheet hadn't dropped. And they were like, yeah, it's right. where did you get it? And I said, I can't tell you that. Like, that's the number one thing a journalist can't do. I cannot tell you where I got the story. They said, we've got a major problem. Jose has gone nuts. Like, off the scale.
So unlike him, too. You know?
But they were like off the scale nuts. He's blaming literally everybody. And he's asking who knows you, who doesn't know you, all this. He said, you would not believe the trouble you've caused. And I'm like, sorry. Anyway, I think they won the game like 4-0 or something. And I thought that was it. I thought, off the hook. They've won the game. It'll get forgotten about. And nothing was said to start with. And I didn't hear anything more from the Chelsea press office. And I thought it'd gone. And then about 2 weeks later, I walk into a press conference and we sit down and Mourinho, and you may all remember this, starts talking about rats. And he says, I've got rats in my team who are leaking the team. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, fuck. And I'm like, he's basically talking about that team sheet and there isn't a rat. It's me stood at the top of the bridge.
The bridge.
And he's going on about rats, this, that and the other. And I'm like, oh, man. So it makes the back page of every single newspaper. It makes the bloody Sky Sports are going yellow ticker on it. Mourinho's accusing his own players of being rats. And I'm just like, oh my God. So I was like... So I did what I've never done before. I rang up the Chelsea press office and I was like, right, I am going to tell you how that story came about because this has got out of hand now. Like, this has got stupid. And I never told you this. I never want to talk about it ever again. This is it. So I literally talked them through it. And to this day, if you go up the steps, when you go onto the bridge, there is this weird little green sort of bed sheet that they attach to the trees so that when the leaves fall off the trees, you can no longer see anything past because it's this weird, like I say, it's like a bed sheet. It's so amateur.
The Matt Law bed sheet.
But that went up the next day and it survived all the weather and everything for 10 years. It's still there. If you go, you will see it. A green sheet. And that's thanks to me.
Hey.
There you go.
It's quite a story.
It is quite a story. Sorry it's very long.
No, that's the way to put it together. Look, we've had a lot of fun here with our friends at Classic Football Shirts in London during this wonderful trip over. We've had a great time with you, per usual.
As usual.
As it were, but the glasses are empty. And so we need to use that as the signal that the podcast should come to a conclusion in this version. Is that correct, Nick?
Yeah.
Okay, glad to hear that. Yeah. Thank you so much for those who attended in person. Thank you so much to our friends at Classic Football Shirts for helping host us. We'd love to give them another round of applause. But as we do always, at the end of every episode, until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.